I don't care if your whole fat family starves, the mayor snapped. Blackwater Creek is not a charity ward, girl. The words cracked through the cramped general store like a whip. Men went quiet over their coffee. A woman in the corner stopped counting beans into a sack. Even the old stove seemed to hiss in disapproval before settling again. But no one spoke up for the girl standing in front of the town council table. Rosalind Rose Brennan stood with her shoulders squared and her hands clenched so tight the knuckles were white. At 24 and close to 300 pounds, she took up more space than most women in Blackwater Creek, Idaho territory. All her life, that extra space had meant extra stares, extra whispers, extra jokes. Today, it meant something else. She was the only one in her family still strong enough to stand here and beg. "My father's back is broken," she said, forcing her voice not to shake. "He fell with half a ton of rock in the number 3 shaft. He'll never work the mine again. My mother coughs blood every morning. My sisters are 12 and 9. We have 3 months before the bank takes our homestead. I am asking plainly, is there any work I can do? Any at all?" Councilman Reed cleared his throat, not quite meeting her eyes. "Miss Brennan, the mine doesn't hire women. The livery is full up. The laundry has all the hands it needs. Perhaps if you were a bit more presentable, one of the saloons might—" "I said I'll work," Rose cut in, cheeks burning. "I didn't say I'd sell myself." A few men snorted. Someone near the stove muttered, "Sell herself? To who?" And there was a ripple of low laughter that made the back of Rose's neck prickle. She stood her ground anyway. Mayor Hutchins spread his hands. "Then I'm afraid there's nothing more this council can do. Maybe if you found yourself a husband, he could take on your father's note. A man with a decent wage might—" "A husband," Rose said, and this time the bitter laugh escaped before she could stop it. "Look at me, Mayor. I am poor, I am fat, and I come with a dying father and 3 dependents. What man in this town is going to volunteer for that burden?" "I would." The voice came from the back of the store, deep and rough, like rocks grinding in a riverbed. Heads turned. The crowd parted just enough for a tall figure to step through. Matthias Stone Carver, the mountain man who came down twice a year with furs and rumors and left with supplies and silence. He was a hard sight. 6'5" at least, shoulders like a barn door, hair going iron gray and worn long beneath his hat. His beard hid half his face, but his pale blue eyes were clear and sharp. He smelled faintly of pine smoke and cold air, as though the mountains clung to him. "Mr. Carver," the mayor said cautiously, "you have some comment?" Stone didn't look at the mayor. He was watching Rose, weighing something in her face that most men had never bothered to see. "Not a comment," he said. "An offer." The store went so quiet Rose could hear the wind clawing at the windows. "You said no man would take that burden," Stone went on. "I will. I'll marry you, Rose Brennan. You, your broken father, your sick mother, your 2 little sisters. I'll take the whole burden up the mountain with me." The room erupted in whispers. Someone choked on his coffee. Rose just stared at him, stunned. "Why?" she managed. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Stone said simply. "I've watched you haul coal and chop wood when your father couldn't stand. I've heard you reading from your mother's Bible on Sundays and drilling your sisters on their sums. A woman who'll stand in front of 5 men and the whole town to beg for her family's life. That's a woman worth betting mine on." He finally glanced around at the watching faces, then back to Rose. "So, he said. "What do you say? You marry me, I'll keep a roof over all your heads. Food, medicine, land that's paid for, and in time, if you're willing, sons to carry my name. That's my bargain." Rose felt every eye in Blackwater Creek pressing on her. The stove ticked. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, her heart did the same. Before she answered, narrator voice would turn to your viewers. If you were standing in that little frontier store right now, watching this bargain being laid on the table, where would you be watching from in the world? Drop your city or country in the comments. Then ask yourself honestly, would you tell her to say yes? For a long moment after Stone Carver's offer, no one in the store moved. Then Mayor Hutchins cleared his throat as if he'd just swallowed a nail. "Now, see here, Carver," he began, "marriage is not a solution we can just toss around like—" "You said a husband might take on their debt," Stone cut in. "I'm volunteering, unless your problem is with me, Mayor." Half the room suddenly discovered they had somewhere else to look. Men who'd bought Stone's pelts and relied on him to guide them through winter passes suddenly found the ceiling very interesting. "It's irregular," Hutchins said weakly. "You live a rather isolated life. Miss Brennan may prefer a more civilized—" "Miss Brennan can speak for herself," Stone said. His gaze didn't leave Rose. "Well, do you want the offer or not?" Civilization had never done Rose many favors. Civilization had given her a father broken by a mind that cut corners on safety and called it God's will when rock fell. Civilization had given her a mother coughing blood into dishcloths and hiding them under the bed so as not to worry her daughters. Civilization had given her schoolyard chants. Fat Rosie takes up space like three, then apprenticeship laughter. Don't bother with the blue dress girl, 3 bolts won't cover you. And finally, the knowledge that the town's men saw her as a joke, not a woman. The mountain man watching her now did not look amused. "Why?" she asked again, more quietly. "I need to know exactly why." The store faded. Rose only saw Stone. "Because I need what you are," he said. "Not thinner, not prettier. You. I'm getting older. The trapline is big. The cabin is bigger. I can't run it alone forever. I could hire help, but hired men leave when the snow gets deep or the gold fever hits. A wife with her people under my roof?" He shook his head once. "That's different. That's roots. That's a future. And—" He paused, jaw working as if the next words hurt. "And because I watched my sister stand where you're standing," he went on. "Same eyes, same desperation. She was big like you. Council told her the same thing. No work, no help. She tried to sell her sewing, her baking, her pride. By spring, she and her 3 little ones were in the churchyard. I was in the army and too far away to stop it. I'm not watching that story again." The room went utterly silent. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. Rose swallowed. "And what would you expect from me, Mr. Carver? Say it plain." "Plain, then." He folded his massive arms. "You and your kin come up the mountain with me. I take on your father's debt, pay off the homestead, move what can be moved. You keep my house, help with the work. Your sisters learn their letters and whatever else you've been teaching them. Your parents eat every day until God himself calls them not hunger. In time, if you can bear it and if you want it, you share my bed. I want children, sons if we're lucky, daughters if we're blessed. I won't lie about that." Color rushed to Rose's cheeks. Behind her, she heard someone snicker about sons from a sow. And the cartilage-thin patience she'd carried all her life finally snapped. She turned just enough to see the men along the wall. Any of you offering something better? She asked, voice sharp enough to cut. Food for 4 people through winter? Medicine, land, safety? No? Then keep your jokes. The laughter died. She faced Stone again. And if I can't give you children? Her voice dropped, so only he and the council could hear. If God says no, no matter how hard I try, then God says no, Stone replied simply. The bargain still stands. I'm not buying a brood mare, Miss Brennan. I'm asking for a wife. I want more than survival. We can talk about that when you trust me. But I won't raise a hand to you over something neither of us can control. She believed him. She didn't know why, but she did. Maybe it was the way he said wife, like it was a word that carried weight, not ownership. Maybe it was the memory of him coming down from the mountains every winter with his steady stride and quiet eyes, never drunk, never cruel, trading fair and leaving with no trouble left behind him. Rose thought of their small sod house on the edge of town, the thin walls that let in the cold, her father lying flat on the pallet, his face gray with pain, her mother's cough, her sister's wide eyes when they thought she wasn't looking. Would you let them starve because you were afraid a man might see you undressed? The hard voice inside her asked. Is your shame worth 4 graves? She lifted her chin. I'll marry you, she said, on conditions. The mayor sputtered. Miss Brennan, really, this is hardly the... Stone's mouth twitched just faintly. Name them. My parents stay together in your house. No shoving my father into a shed or my mother into a corner because her cough bothers you. My sisters get schooling. I'll teach them, but there must be time for it. And if you ever strike me or them in anger, the bargain is broken, and I walk down that mountain even if I have to crawl. Done, Stone said without hesitation. I don't hit women, and I don't hit children. We'll clear out the spare room for your parents. Loft is big enough for your sisters. You take the loft, too, at first, if that makes you easier in your mind. We'll go at your pace. Rose nodded once. Then we have a bargain. He held out his hand. It was huge, scarred, browned by sun and wind, the hand of a man who worked and had bled for it. Rose put her smaller, work-roughened hand in his. His grip was strong but careful, like he was aware he could break her fingers without meaning to. Rose Brennan, Mayor Hutchins said faintly, do you understand what you're agreeing to? Life in the high country is hard. There are wolves, blizzards. There is starvation here, Rose said. I'll take wolves and blizzards over watching my family die slow. An hour later, the circuit judge had been dragged from his mid-morning coffee and inked their names into the county ledger. It was the least romantic wedding anyone in Blackwater Creek had ever seen. No flowers, no lace, just a fat girl in her best worn dress and a mountain man in buckskins standing side by side while the judge mumbled the familiar words. Do you, Matthias Carver, take Rosalind Brennan? I do, Stone said, without a heartbeat's pause. And do you, Rosalind Brennan, take Matthias Carver? Rose looked at the man who just bought her family another chance at life. I do, she said, with everything I am. By dusk, the Brennan family's few belongings were loaded into Stone's sturdy wagon. Patrick Brennan lay on a mattress of quilts, his face pinched with pain, but his eyes bright with something like relief. Catherine Brennan sat beside him, wrapped in shawls, one thin hand gripping her husband's. Sarah and Emma clung to each other on a pile of trunks, watching the town disappear. Rose sat beside Stone on the wagon seat, her hands folded in her lap. The horses leaned into the harness, and Blackwater Creek shrank behind them with every clatter of their hooves. "You can change your mind," Stone said quietly as the last buildings fell away. "Road's long enough. All you have to do is say the word, and I'll turn this team around and bring you back. I won't hold you to anything you can't bear." Rose looked ahead, where the dirt road bent toward the dark line of the pines and the mountains rising beyond, blue and cold and vast. "I meant my vows," she answered. "I'll birth you as many sons as God will give me, and I'll work till my hands bleed if it keeps them all fed. Just don't ask me to give up on my family." "I'd never ask that," Stone said. "We save them together or not at all." The wagon rolled on toward the timberline, toward the cabin she had not yet seen, toward a life she couldn't yet imagine. Behind them, Blackwater Creek went back to its business, already making new stories out of what they'd witnessed. Out here, though, it was just one very large woman, one very hard man, a loaded wagon, and a bargain that had just become a marriage. The first miles out of Blackwater Creek were gentle, winding past the last fenced fields and fallow pastures. But within an hour the road narrowed, the ground sloped upward, and the forest swallowed the sky. Rose Brennan Carver gripped the wagon seat until her fingers ached. Stone drove with the ease of a man who knew every bend and rut of the trail. His huge hands rested lightly on the reins, guiding the team with quiet commands. Behind them, the wagon creaked under the weight of furniture, quilts, crates of canned food, and 4 human lives depending on him. Twice, Rose looked back at her family, her father sleeping fitfully, her mother coughing softly into a rag, her sisters whispering questions they didn't dare say aloud. Each time, Stone glanced sideways at her, reading her worry without asking. "They'll make it," he said during one steep climb. "Wagons built for haulage. Horses are sure-footed. I've brought freight twice this weight up steeper grades." Rose swallowed. "It's not the wagon I'm worried about." Stone made a low sound. Agreement, not dismissal. "This is a hard trail. No point sugar-coating it. But you're strong. They're stronger than they know. And I've never lost anyone on the road." Rose didn't answer. Instead, she watched the forest thicken around them, towering pines and firs, trunks black as ironwood, needles whispering overhead. The air grew colder, sharper, and the light dimmed as clouds gathered over the peaks. At noon, they stopped beside a stream to rest the horses. Stone lifted her father from the wagon with the same care one might use for a newborn, his arms steady and sure. Rose spread blankets, her mother stirred soup on a small fire, and her sisters fetched water, everybody working without complaint, as if instinctively knowing this was not a place for wasted effort. While Catherine Brennan slept, Emma tugged Rose's sleeve. "Is he dangerous?" the little girl whispered, glancing at Stone where he filled the water barrels. "What makes you ask?" "He's so big," Emma said, "like someone out of the old wilderness stories." Rose studied her husband, broad-shouldered, powerfully muscled, sleeves rolled up over forearms roped with strength. He looked like a man carved from the very mountain ahead. But then he knelt, cupping water in his hand to offer to their skittish mare. The gesture was gentle enough to quiet the animal instantly. "No," Rose whispered, "not dangerous, just different." Her mother, from her pallet, rasped softly. "A man can be strong without being cruel. Remember that, girls." When they rode again, the sky thickened with snow-heavy clouds. Stone gave Rose his winter coat without asking. huge, fur-lined, smelling of wood smoke and pine resin. "You'll freeze without it," Rose protested. "Not likely," Stone said. "I run hot." But Rose noticed a faint tremor in his shoulders by late afternoon, the only sign he'd been cold at all. The trail narrowed to a ledge carved along the mountain's flank, barely wide enough for the wagon. Below, the valley dropped away into dizzying gloom. Rose's breath caught. "Stone, this can't be safe." "It's safe if you trust your team," he said, "and if you don't look down." "I already looked down." Stone gave a short huff of amusement. "Then look at me." She did. His profile was harsh, almost intimidating. The angular nose, the wind-burned skin, the old faint scar under his jaw. But his eyes, when they met hers, were steady, as if nothing on earth, mountain, storm, or fate, could shake him. "Follow my voice," he murmured. "We'll be across in 5 minutes." He talked the entire way, quiet, even statements about the horses, the snow, the ridge ahead. He spoke not to calm himself, but to anchor her, and she realized it was working. She exhaled shakily when they reached safe ground. "See?" Stone said. "Not so bad." "That was terrible," Rose whispered. "But you did it." Something unspoken passed between them then. Not affection, not yet, but a kind of respect, not earned in the store nor in the mayor's office, but here, where fear and survival stood close together. By nightfall, the temperature had dropped sharply. Stone chose a sheltered hollow beneath a granite outcrop and began setting camp with practiced speed. Rose helped her mother and father settle inside the wagon, then returned to find Stone splitting wood by the firelight. His movements were efficient, but stiff. "You're freezing," Rose blurted. "Been colder," he said. "Not a reason." She stepped close, an instinct, not a decision, and wrapped his coat tighter around him. Her hands brushed his ribcage, strong beneath the layers, solid. Stone stilled, as if confused by the gentleness. "You shouldn't fuss over me," he murmured. "Someone has to," Rose answered, surprising them both. A long silence followed. Finally, he cleared his throat. "You're a good woman, Rose Carver." "And you're a stubborn man," she replied. He gave a faint, rueful smile. They ate quietly, salt pork stew and hard bread softened with broth. The fire popped softly under the early snowflakes drifting down. When Rose checked on her father later, she found him awake. "He's a good man, Rosie girl," Patrick said weakly. "A hard man, but not unkind." Rose nodded, but she didn't trust herself to speak. Stone was keeping watch when she came back out, one foot on a log, rifle across his knee, gaze scanning the dark tree line. "You can sleep," Rose told him. "I'll take first watch." "You don't need to." "Stone, I married you. I didn't promise to let you do everything alone." That earned her a long, searching look, one that warmed her more than the fire. "Wake me in 2 hours," he finally said. "I will." She did not. The fire crackled softly as Rose stood guard, shoulders wrapped in Stone's coat, the mountain wind tugging at her hair. Behind her, her family slept safe for the first time in months. Ahead, the wilderness waited, vast and indifferent. And beside her, a man carved by the same wilderness had offered her a future. Whether she deserved it or not, Rose meant to rise to meet it. The Carver cabin appeared just after noon on the 4th day, rising out of the pines like something half-built by human hands and half-grown from the mountain itself. It was larger than Rose expected, 2 full stories, thick-hewn logs, a stone chimney broad enough to stand inside, Smoke curled steadily from the top, a promise of warmth that made Rose's exhaustion break into shaky relief. Her sisters gasped. Her mother crossed herself. Her father whispered, "We'll be warm here," as if saying it made it true. Stone halted the wagon before the front porch and climbed down with the slow, deliberate movements of a man who'd carried too much responsibility for too many miles. "This is home," he said simply. The word struck Rose somewhere deep. Home. Not a place she expected to see again. Not really. Stone reached for her father first, lifting him gently and carrying him inside. Rose followed with her mother and sisters, opening the heavy door to a rush of warm, wood-smoke-scented air. The interior stunned her. A massive stone hearth dominated the main room, flames licking bright beneath a blackened kettle. The walls were lined with shelves, jars of dried beans, herbs hanging from rafters, coils of rope, neatly stacked tools. A sturdy table stood near the window. 2 rocking chairs sat by the fire. Woven rugs softened the plank floor. This wasn't the den of a solitary trapper. This was a home built by a man who didn't do anything by half. "My bedroom's through there," Stone said, pointing to a doorway. "Your parents can take it. I'll move my things." Rose blinked. "Stone, that's your room." "You think I'd give a sick woman and a man with a broken back the loft ladder?" His tone was matter-of-fact, not boastful. "I'll sleep out here by the fire. Been doing it 15 years. Won't kill me." Rose opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She recognized that tone. Unyielding kindness. The kind that wasn't fishing for thanks. She nodded once. "Thank you." Stone looked away quickly, uncomfortable with the softness in her voice. The next hours were a blur of settling in. Stone hauled trunks upstairs for the girls, laid furs over the loft floor to keep their feet warm, stocked the main room with extra wood until the pile reached his waist. Rose moved like a woman on borrowed energy, arranging bedding, heating broth for her parents, guiding her sisters through their new space. At one point, she paused near the hearth, overwhelmed despite herself. "Rose," she turned. Stone stood in the doorway, holding out a folded garment. "Wear this," he said. "Mountain nights are cold even with a fire." Rose unfolded it. A thick woolen dress, simple but well made, dyed a deep pine green, much larger than anything she owned. "I made it last winter," Stone said, awkward for the first time she could remember. "I sew when the snows are heavy. Figured I'd have a wife one day. Figured wrong size, but I thought you might like it." Something warm opened inside Rose's chest. No man had ever made something for her hands-on. No man had ever thought her worth preparing for. "Stone," she whispered, "it's beautiful." "It's practical," he corrected, but his ears flushed red beneath his hair. "Try it on while there's daylight." She changed upstairs, and the garment fit surprisingly well, loose where she needed it, long enough to keep her warm, soft, instead of scratchy. When she descended the ladder, Stone looked up from mending a trap, and for a heartbeat something flickered across his face, something he quickly hid. "You'll be warm," he said. Nothing more. But his voice had changed, rougher, lower. That first evening, Rose cooked. Not the thin, watery meals they'd been rationing in town, but real food. Rabbit stew with onions and herbs, thick biscuits from Stone's flour stock, tea brewed from dried spruce tips. Stone had offered to take over, but Rose shook her head. "My mother can't stand for long," she said. "My father can't stand at all. My sisters need guidance. Let me do something useful." Stone didn't argue. He simply watched her work, quiet and steady. When they sat down to eat, Rose's parents in the bedroom, her sisters at the table, Stone waited until she had taken her first bite before he touched his own food. Rose noticed. She also noticed the way he filled her bowl a little fuller than the others, without comment. No man had ever done that without mockery. After dinner, her sisters curled up near the hearth, asleep within minutes. Her father dozed in bed. Her mother whispered with faint breath that she could finally feel warmth in her bones again. And Rose found herself sitting across from Stone, the firelight throwing shifting gold over his scarred cheek. "You built all of this alone," Rose murmured. Stone nodded, "one wall at a time." "Why?" He didn't answer at first. The fire cracked once, loud enough to startle her youngest sister. Stone finally said, "Because I thought someday I might not be alone." The simple honesty of it struck like an arrow. She studied his face, the hard angles, the sun-etched lines, the pale eyes that rarely gave anything away. Tonight, they gave everything away. "Thank you for bringing us here," Rose said softly, "for giving us a chance." Stone's gaze held hers, steady as bedrock. "You're earning your place here, Rose. You didn't come to leech off me. You came to work, and you have. That's a rare thing." Her throat tightened. "I didn't think anyone would ever see value in me." "I saw it," he said quietly. "Still do." A long silence, a warm silence. When the fire burned low, Stone rose. "I'll take first watch," he said. "Always do the first night. New tracks near the ridge last time I was down. Might be wolves." Rose stiffened. "Wolves? Not a danger if the fire stays burning." His voice gentled. "You and your sisters are safe." She hesitated, then asked something she hadn't planned. "Do you ever let anyone else take watch?" "Not often." "Will you let me?" Stone studied her a long moment. "You're exhausted." "I'm not helpless," she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "And you've done enough today." He finally nodded once. "Wake me in 2 hours." She smiled faintly. "I will." When she stepped outside wrapped in his massive coat, the night took her breath away. Cold, silent, stars sharp enough to cut. Behind her, she heard Stone settling onto his bedroll, the cabin creaking softly as it warmed. She kept watch, the rifle propped across her knees, listening to the quiet breath of her sleeping family, and for the first time in years, she felt something like safety settling into her bones. The mountains had a way of teaching truths slowly, through days of repetition, small closenesses, the soothing grind of work. Rose settled into cabin life with a steadiness that surprised even her. She rose before dawn to gather kindling, tended the fire while Stone checked the perimeter, cooked hearty meals that gave her family color again, and learned Stone's rhythms the way one learns the breathing of a draft horse. But winter in the high country had teeth, and before long those teeth began to show. It began with tracks. Rose found them one morning while hauling wood from the shed. Deep impressions circling the yard, three-toed, wide as her palm. Her breath clouded the air. "Stone," she called softly, "come look." He was at her side in seconds, rifle already in hand. One glance, and every line of his body tightened. "Not wolves," he muttered. "Men." Rose's stomach knotted. "Who?" Stone crouched, fingers brushing the snow. "4 of them. Came through last night. Circled the cabin. Didn't come closer." "Why not?" Fire was strong, and they were waiting, watching. A chill that had nothing to do with the wind slid down her back. "For what?" "For me," Stone said. or for what's mine." Her throat closed. "Does this have to do with your past?" His jaw shifted, a muscle tightening, a memory rising like a scar from beneath the skin. "Inside," he said. "We talk there." Rose gathered the girls, ushered them inside with a calmness she didn't feel. Stone barred the door, threw 2 extra logs on the fire, and sat heavily at the table. He looked like a man preparing to open a wound. "Rose," he said, voice low, "there's something you don't know about me." She didn't sit. She stood opposite him, meeting his eyes without flinching. "Tell me." "For 12 years," Stone began, "before I came to these mountains for good, I was a cavalry scout." Rose blinked. "In the army?" He nodded once. "And good at it. Too good. I tracked outlaws, deserters, raiders. Saw things a man shouldn't have to see. Did things a man shouldn't have to do." He rubbed a thumb over a scar near his wrist. "Men don't forget the man who hunted them. They wait. They gather new friends. They follow." "Is that who those men are?" Rose whispered. "Old enemies?" "No," Stone said grimly. "These are new ones." Her confusion must have shown. Stone leaned forward. "Rose, I didn't just buy supplies in town. I heard things, miners talking, drifters bragging. There's a man down in the low country, Jonas Pike, who's building a crew, claims the whole northern trap line should belong to him. He's been pushing men off their land, burning cabins, taking furs by force." Rose's breath caught. "And you're next." "I'm the one he wants most, because I'm the only one he couldn't intimidate last year. I told him he had no claim up here. That made him angry. And now? And now he's sent men to see if I'm alone." Stone's pale eyes lifted to hers. They weren't expecting to find a family. Something knifed through Rose's chest, fear, sharp and thin. "What do we do?" she asked. Stone looked at her long enough. She felt the weight of his answer before he gave it. "We prepare and we stay together." He stood and crossed the room to her. She realized, only when he reached her, how cold she'd become. "Rose," he said softly, taking her hand in one of his huge ones, "listen to me. I won't let anything happen to you, or your father, or your mother, or your sisters. I'd burn this whole mountain before I let them lay a finger on you." Her breath trembled. "You can't fight 4 men alone." "I won't have to. You're a better shot than half the scouts I trained with. Your father has my pistol. And these," he nodded toward the loft where the girls slept, "these mountains teach courage faster than any school." She swallowed hard. "You're trusting me with their lives. I trusted you with mine the night you dragged me through a blizzard," Stone said. "This is no different." It was a strange comfort, a fierce one. But that wasn't the only secret waiting in the cabin that week. 3 days later, while sorting drying herbs in Stone's workshop, Rose found something she wasn't meant to find. An old military journal tucked behind a row of tools. The leather was worn, the pages yellowed. Against her better judgment, she opened it. The first page was simple. "Matthias Carver, U.S. Cavalry Scout assigned, 7th Regiment Winter Campaign, 1863. Her stomach dipped. She flipped through slowly. Names of raids, coordinates of ambushes, notes about captured informants. Then, lost 3 men in the crossing, snow too deep. Wolves followed the wounded. Failed to reach the settlers' cabin in time. Buried 4 bodies. Couldn't bury the 5th. Rose's chest tightened. Stone never spoke of sadness, never spoke of failure. Yet here were pieces of him, quiet, broken pieces left behind in ink. Footsteps sounded in the doorway. Rose snapped the book shut. Stone stood there, face unreadable. "You weren't supposed to find that." "I'm sorry," Rose stammered. "I wasn't prying, I know," he said softly. "It's all right." He took the journal carefully, almost gently, and placed it on the table. Rose hesitated. "That cabin," she whispered. "The one you didn't reach in time. Was that your sister?" Stone didn't answer, but she knew. Without thinking, she stepped closer and put her hand over his. His fingers tightened around hers, just once, but with the strength of a man who had carried grief alone for far too long. "I'm not her," Rose whispered. "I know that, but I'm here, and you're not alone anymore." Stone's throat moved. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. They stood there a moment, fire crackling in the next room, snow whispering against the windows, danger gathering like storm clouds on the ridge. And in that quiet, Rose realized something terrifying and wonderful. They were no longer two people bound by a desperate bargain. They were two lives intertwined by choice, fear, past wounds, and something beginning to grow between them that neither had asked for, but both needed desperately. Stone finally exhaled. "They'll come soon," he murmured. "Pike's men, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, but they'll come." Rose nodded. "Then we'll be ready." Stone studied her, a faint awe in his eyes. "You're not afraid?" "I am," Rose said, "but fear is not going to feed my family, and it's not going to protect yours." His jaw set. "Then we stand together." Outside, the wind rose, rattling the cabin walls. Inside, Rose Brennan Carver squared her shoulders and faced the storm ahead. For the first time in her life, she felt like someone worth fighting for, and someone ready to fight back. The first sign came just after sundown. Stone was oiling his rifle by the fire. Rose was kneading dough at the table, her sleeves rolled to the elbow, her strong arms moving with purpose. Her sisters were upstairs, reading by lantern light. Patrick was sharpening tools in the workshop. Then 3 sharp knocks echoed through the walls, too heavy to be mistaken for wind or falling branches. Not frantic, not timid, deliberate. Stone didn't move at first, neither did Rose. A 4th knock. Slow, mocking. Stone set the rifle down and rose to his full height. "They're here!" Rose wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron and reached for the second rifle leaning against the doorframe. Her pulse stuttered, but her grip was steady. Stone whispered, "Behind me." "No," Rose whispered back. "Beside you." He shot her a look, half warning, half something like pride. But he didn't argue. He unbarred the door but didn't open it fully. Through the crack, the firelight illuminated 3 men on horseback and 1 on foot. Their faces were half-shadowed, but their expressions were unmistakable, cruel, hungry for something they felt entitled to take. The one in front tipped his hat. "Evening, Carver." Stone's voice was flat. "State your business." "Simple. Jonas Pike wants your lines." The man shrugged. "You give us rights to trap your north ridge, and we ride off peaceful. Refuse, and we'll burn you out come morning." Stone opened the door another inch, enough to let the firelight fall on the rifle in his hand. "No." "That's unfortunate," the man said. "See, we noticed something fun on the way up. Heard your little lady chopping wood yesterday. Loud, hard. She's a big one, Carver. Quite a find." Rose didn't flinch, but something cold ignited behind her ribs. The man grinned wider. "Tell you what, we'll take the ridge and the woman. Seems only fair. She looks strong enough to keep a few camps warm." Stone's breath changed, not louder, just sharper, more dangerous. "You speak of my wife again," he said softly, "and I'll put you in the snow so fast your shadow won't catch up." The man laughed once, ugly. "You expecting to scare us with big talk? You're outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in your little love nest." His eyes slid past Stone, settling on Rose. "Come now, sweetheart. You really want to stay with a gray-bearded relic? You could have 6 strong men keeping you entertained." The rifle cracked before he finished the sentence. Rose hadn't fired. Stone had. The bullet hit the snow between the man's boots, sending white powder exploding upward. The horses reared. The men cursed, scrambling to steady themselves. Stone's voice was quiet. "The next one goes through your skull." The leader's grin faltered. He spat into the snow. "You'll regret that." Then he jerked his head to his men. "Back to camp. We finish this at dawn." They rode off into the trees, their torches bobbing like angry fireflies until the night swallowed them. Stone shut the door and dropped the bar into place. The cabin was silent except for the fire. Rose set her rifle down. "Morning," she murmured, "doesn't give us much time." Stone rubbed both hands over his face. "I shouldn't have let you stand there, should have kept you away from the door." "I'm not a thing to hide," Rose said, "or a weakness, or something they can threaten you with. I'm your wife, your partner. You said we stand together. I intend to do just that." Stone looked at her then, really looked at her, at the flushed determination in her cheeks, the firelight catching the steel in her eyes, the strength in the body she had once apologized for. "Rose Carver," he said quietly, "there are moments when I'm convinced you were forged in these mountains. You're braver than any woman I've ever known." She stepped closer, her voice firm but soft. "Tell me what we need to do." He picked up the rifles, handed her the one she knew best. "We prepare the windows, block the back approach, load every weapon, wake your father." Rose nodded. "And the girls?" Stone hesitated. "We put them in the root cellar with blankets and a lantern. It's the safest place." Rose's breath wavered for the first time. "Will we be able to get to them if—" Stone touched her cheek. "No if. We hold this cabin." She swallowed hard, then nodded again. They moved with efficiency born of fear sharpened into purpose, shuttering windows, stacking crates by the door, placing rifles within reach of every vantage point. When the work was done, Stone found Rose in the kitchen, checking ammunition. He stepped close enough that she felt his warmth. "No matter what happens tomorrow," he whispered, "you saved me the day you agreed to come up this mountain. You've given me a family, a future, a reason to fight." Tears filled her eyes, not from fear, but from the deepest, bone-deep certainty that she had finally found a life where she mattered. "I'm not letting them take this from us," she whispered. Stone rested his forehead against hers. "Then let them try." That night, they didn't sleep. They sat shoulder to shoulder by the fire, rifles beside them, listening to the wind rise and the distant echo of men gathering in the dark. At dawn, the storm would break. They came at first light. Snow still clung to the branches, glinting gold under the rising sun, when 6 riders emerged from the tree line. Their torches were gone, replaced by revolvers and rifles slung low across their saddles. Jonas Pike rode at the front, thick-shouldered, mean-eyed, the kind of man who believed fear was as good as law. Stone stepped out onto the porch, boots planted firmly, rifle steady in his hands. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He didn't need to. Every man facing him knew he'd already marked the ground where the first body would fall. Jonas barked a laugh. "Still standing, Carver? Thought you'd run like a rabbit in the night." "You came to steal my land," Stone replied. "Then you threatened my family. I don't run." "Family," Jonas sneered. "You mean that fat Brennan girl you dragged up here? Word around town says she begged you to marry her. That true? She promised you sons if you kept her fed?" Stone's jaw tightened a fraction, but he didn't rise to the bait. Jonas swung off his horse. "Tell you what, we'll take the ridge, you live. We'll take the woman, you die quick. You choose." Behind the cabin window, Rose watched Stone's shoulders stiffen, and she knew then this fight wasn't truly about trap lines. It was about humiliation, about cruelty, about men who saw her body as leverage to break the one person who had never judged her. Stone spoke before she could move. "You say one more word about my wife." But Rose was already walking toward the door. She stepped onto the porch before Stone could stop her, her chin lifted, her belly full and heavy with the child they'd made together, shifting inside her. She looked nothing like the timid girl who'd begged a town council for help months ago. She looked like a woman forged in hardship, carrying the fire of someone worth fighting for. Jonas blinked. "Well, look at you. Big girls got spine." Rose didn't waver. "You think my size makes me weak. You think it makes me less. But Stone Carver took me into these mountains, and I've done every job he's done. Hauled meat, chopped wood, survived blizzards. My body has never failed me. My courage never will. And if you think you can walk up here and take what's mine, my husband, my home, my family, then you don't know the first thing about strength." Jonas scoffed. "What, you going to scare us off with a speech?" "No," Rose said, raising her rifle with perfect steadiness. "I'm going to show you I can shoot straighter than you can think." The men shifted nervously. They hadn't expected her calm. They hadn't expected her presence. They definitely hadn't expected her skill. The barrel pointed directly at Jonas's heart, not wavering an inch. "Last warning," Stone said, stepping beside her. "You walk away now, or this mountain becomes your grave." Jonas looked between them, between the giant mountain man and the pregnant woman who didn't flinch at the sight of death, and something inside him faltered. He wasn't facing a victim. He was facing a family. "Mount up," he muttered to his men. "What?" one of them hissed. "We can take them." "No, we can't." Jonas backed toward his horse, fury twisting his features. "This ain't over, Carver." "Oh, yes, it is," Stone replied. They rode off without another word. When they disappeared into the trees, Stone finally lowered his rifle. He turned to Rose, awe in his eyes. "You walked out here," he whispered, "and saved my life." Rose's breath shook. "No, we saved each other." He pulled her into his arms, the morning sun warming the cabin behind them, the danger finally drifting away like smoke over snow. If you've stayed with Rose and Stone through their climb from desperation to courage, thank you. Stories like theirs remind us that strength comes in many shapes, that love often grows in the harshest places, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is stand beside someone who believes in them. Before you go, tell me, where in the world are you listening from? Your comments turn these stories into something larger than any single mountain, any single town. And if you still believe that love can rise out of hardship and remake a life, don't go far. The next story is already waiting for you. I'll pay everything I have for that fat slave." The words exploded through the filthy auction barn like a gunshot, silencing the drunk laughter and the clink of whiskey glasses. For a heartbeat, even the flies circling the lantern seemed to hang in the air. Men turned in their seats, boots scraping sawdust, trying to see who had shouted. But only one person on that stage really heard it, the woman with the wooden sign hanging from a rope around her neck. It read, in crooked black letters, $1, fat, broken. She stood barefoot on the splintered platform, wrists tied in front of her with a short length of rope. Her dress was a sack of brown homespun, torn at the hem and tight across her full belly and wide hips. She was heavy, thick through the waist and arms, with the kind of soft, rounded body the men in the barn mocked loudly when they thought it was safe, and stared at quietly when they thought no one was looking. Her hair, once a bright straw gold, hung in dull, tangled ropes around her face. Her eyes were lowered, as if she'd learned the hard way that meeting a man's gaze only invited more trouble. The auctioneer had called her Joe, as if a woman's full name was too expensive for a crowd that only wanted flesh. "Look at her," one rancher jeered from the front row, "a whole winter's rations on 2 legs. Could feed my hogs on her and still have meat left over." Another man laughed. The auctioneer, Silas Crow, spread his arms theatrically. Now, gentlemen, she may not be much to look at in your eyes, but she works hard enough. Strong back, wide hips. Somebody's bound to want her. Let's start the bidding at $1. One single, lonely dollar." A wave of cruel laughter rolled through the barn. No one raised a hand. Before we go deeper into this story, I want to know something from you. Where in the world are you listening from right now? Tell me your city and your country in the comments. These old frontier tales travel farther than any wagon ever did. Silas clicked his tongue. Nobody. Not even for amusement, boys. She eats like 3, but she'll scrub floors like 6. At the back wall, half in shadow, a broad-shouldered mountain man shifted his weight. His coat of rough furs was still dusted with snow from the high passes. His beard was thick and wild, more gray in it now than there should have been for a man in his 30s. His green eyes were tired, the eyes of someone who had ridden farther than sense allowed. He hadn't meant to shout. The words had torn out of him the moment he saw her led onto the stage, because under the grime, under the tangled hair and the dullness in her eyes, he'd seen something no one else saw. The shape of her face, the curve of her mouth, the way her hands trembled as if they remembered a life that had once been gentle. For 5 years, Daniel Bear Mackenzie had ridden from town to town, from mining camp to border settlement, looking for a woman everyone else swore was dead, his wife. And now, staring at the broken, fat slave on the block, his heart slammed against his ribs as a single, impossible thought roared through him. Josie! Could it be her? Silas Crow blinked in disbelief. "Well, now, looks like we've finally got ourselves a bidder. Step on up, stranger. Let's have a look at the man willing to empty his pockets for her." Dozens of heads turned as Daniel Mackenzie stepped out of the shadows. He was enormous, broad as a barn door, shoulders bowed from years of hauling pelts and timber, beard thick and storm-colored. His coat was made from the hide of a bull elk he'd killed with his bare hands, or so the legend said. But beneath all that wild strength was a man standing on the last threads of hope. "Name your price," Daniel repeated, voice raw. "Everything I have, every cent." Silas smirked. "Slow down. You don't even know what she can do." I don't need to know. Laughter rippled through the room. Men elbowed one another. Look at Bear McKenzie, someone shouted. Didn't know the mountain hermit had a thing for livestock. Another voice chimed in. Must have been too long without a woman. He's finally snapped. Daniel ignored them. His eyes were fixed only on her, the woman standing barefoot on the auction block, head bowed, shoulders trembling. Something inside him cracked a little more with every second he looked at her. Because 5 years ago, his wife Josephine had vanished between two pines in the middle of a summer afternoon. One moment she was behind him on her gray mare, smiling at him over her shoulder. The next, she was swallowed by chaos, gunfire, screaming horses, the screams of outlaws in masks, the rush of hooves. Daniel still remembered the sound her horse made when it bolted, the way the trees blurred as she disappeared. And now, here, this woman's stance, the rise of her cheek, even the shape of her hands, every detail screamed Josie. But she didn't lift her head, didn't react to his voice, didn't show a spark of recognition. Was it her? Or was grief playing tricks on him again? Silas slapped Josie's arm with a riding switch. Show your face, girl. Josie flinched but obeyed, raising her chin. Gasps scattered through the barn. Daniel's breath stopped. It was her. Older, thinner, bruised, hollow-eyed, broken almost beyond recognition, but unmistakably Josie, the woman he loved more than life itself, the woman he'd spent half a decade hunting for through snowstorms and deserts and canyons. Silas grinned. Pretty enough under all that fat and dirt, eh? Don't get excited, boys. She don't talk. Mute as a stone. Daniel's hands curled into fists. A man in the front row spat tobacco on the floor. What good's a slave who can't talk? Can't talk, can't think, can't remember, Silas said casually. Found her wandering half-dead outside the Mesquite Flats mine 3 years ago. No name, no history. Didn't even know she needed food until we forced it down her throat. A real piece of scrap. Daniel felt something cold wrap around his spine. Memory loss, silence, a woman wandering alone in the wilderness. Bring her down, Daniel said quietly. But Silas smirked. Not so fast. Auction rules. She starts at $1. But if there's another bidder, who'd bid on that? Someone scoffed. Silas chuckled. Who indeed? Last chance, boys. Last chance to buy yourselves a big, soft body to keep warm in the winter. He slapped Josie's hip. The crowd roared with laughter. Daniel didn't laugh. He walked straight toward the stage, boots thudding like distant thunder. Silas raised a brow. What are you doing? Daniel opened his satchel and poured it out onto the floorboards. Gold nuggets, silver coins, cash, every scrap of wealth he had accumulated in 5 bleak years of solitude. The crowd gasped. That's everything, Daniel said. Everything I own. Take it and unchain her. Silas swallowed hard. You serious? Daniel's eyes burned. Unchain her. Silas stumbled backward and cut the rope binding Josie's wrists. She swayed, almost collapsing. Daniel caught her before she fell. His arms wrapped around her, holding her as if the world might steal her again. Josie, he whispered into her hair. Josie, it's me. It's Daniel. I found you. You're safe. But Josie didn't answer, didn't blink, didn't react at all. Her eyes stared past him, empty as a winter sky. And that, somehow, was worse than losing her. Can she really be the woman he's been searching for? Someone whispered. Daniel closed his eyes, holding her tighter. He didn't need to ask. His soul already knew. He had found his wife. But the woman in his arms did not know him, did not know herself, did not know she had been loved. He lifted her carefully, cradling her weight as if she were made of glass. "We're going home," he murmured. "Even if you don't remember me, I will remind you." He carried her out of the auction barn, the crowd parting in stunned silence. The desert wind hit them the moment Daniel stepped out of the barn, the smell of dust and rust and old blood swirling around him. He pulled Josie closer, shielding her face with his coat. She didn't resist, but she didn't cling to him either. Her hands hung limply at her sides, like she wasn't sure what hands were for. Daniel lifted her onto his horse, his old reliable Mustang Buckshot, and climbed up behind her, wrapping one thick arm around her waist to keep her steady. "Home," he whispered, nudging the horse forward. "I'm taking you home." But as he said the word, a cold truth struck him. The cabin was a home only if she remembered it. If she didn't, would it feel like a prison? He pushed the thought aside. First, he had to get her away from Desolation Gulch. The sky darkened as they rode out of the lawless settlement, leaving behind jeers that faded with distance. "Hey, Mackenzie!" someone shouted behind him. "Good luck fixing her. She's dead inside." Daniel didn't look back. He just tightened his grip around Josie's middle. "I don't care how long it takes," he murmured. "I'll bring you back to life if it kills me." Josie didn't react. She simply stared ahead, as if the horizon pulled her like an invisible thread. Through sagebrush plains, Joshua trees, and rocky canyons they rode. Daniel kept her tucked against him, steadying her whenever the horse stumbled. She didn't speak, didn't make a sound. The only sign she was truly alive was the slow rise and fall of her breathing against his chest. At sunset, they stopped by a shallow creek. Daniel slid off the horse first and then gently lifted Josie down. Her bare feet touched the ground, and she wobbled like a newborn fawn. He steadied her. "Easy. I've got you." Still nothing. No flicker of recognition. No understanding. Daniel's heart broke a little more. He guided her to a fallen log and sat her down. Then he knelt by the creek, splashed water on his face, and took a long breath. He needed a clear head. For her. He returned to Josie with a canteen. He lifted it to her lips. "Here, drink." For a terrifying moment, she didn't respond. Then she blinked just once and parted her lips. Daniel watched as she drank slowly, water dribbling down her chin. He wiped it gently with his thumb. "Good girl. See? You're safe. With me." Still nothing. But her eyes lingered on his face half a second longer than before. It wasn't much. But to Daniel, it was a spark. As darkness settled over the plains, he built a small fire. Josie sat where he placed her, unmoving, staring into the flames as if mesmerized. Daniel prepared a simple stew of rabbit and roots. He handed her the tin bowl. "Careful, it's hot." She stared at it, didn't lift it, didn't eat. Daniel sat beside her, scooped a spoonful, and lifted it to her lips. "Here, a little." She flinched, not from fear, but from some deep, instinctive discomfort. Her lips tightened, her head trembling slightly from refusal. Daniel froze. He recognized that movement. Years ago, when Josie first arrived in Wind River after leaving her cruel hometown, she had the same instinct, flinching when someone tried to feed her because she'd been mocked for eating. Seeing it now cracked something wide open inside him. He lowered the spoon. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have forced it." He placed the bowl in her hands instead. "You eat when you're ready." For a long moment she stared at the flames. The firelight reflected in her eyes, brown, deep, soft, exactly as he remembered. Then slowly she lifted the bowl to her lips and took one trembling sip of broth. Daniel's throat tightened. "That's it, sweetheart. Good." The wind howled beyond the campfire. Coyotes cried in the distance. Buckshot grazed quietly nearby, but Daniel barely noticed, because Josie had eaten, of her own choice, a small step, a miracle. Later, when he spread his bedroll, he placed Josie's blanket slightly apart from his own, giving her space and safety. "You sleep here," he said softly. "I'll be right next to you. I won't touch you, not unless you want me to. I promise." She looked at him, really looked at him, eyes meeting his for the first time, and there, deep in her gaze, something flickered, not memory, not recognition, but trust. Faint, fragile, but real. Daniel felt his chest ache with relief. She lay down obediently, curling into the blankets. Daniel lay on his own bedroll just inches away, watching the stars blink awake above them. Minutes passed. Then a quiet sound drifted toward him, a soft, broken whimper. Josie? Crying? Daniel rolled toward her instantly. "Josie, what's wrong?" She didn't answer, couldn't answer, but her hand, shaking violently, reached out from her blanket and brushed against his. Daniel froze, and then, gently, he took her hand in his. "I've got you," he whispered, voice cracking. "Sleep now. I won't let anything happen to you ever again." Her fingers tightened around his, just once, then she drifted to sleep. Daniel lay awake the whole night, holding her hand, tears silently sliding into the dirt. He had his wife back, but the road to reclaiming her heart and her mind would be long, maybe impossible, but he would walk every mile of it for her. The cabin came into view on the 5th morning, perched against the slope of the Wind River Range like a stubborn remnant of another life. Mist clung to the tree line, and the sound of the creek nearby whispered through the pines. Daniel slowed the horse as Josie gazed up at the small home. Her eyes didn't widen. She didn't gasp or smile or blink away a memory. But she stared, a long, searching stare that made Daniel's breath catch. Something inside her was reaching. He could feel it. "This is home, Josie," he whispered. "Our home." Josie didn't respond, but she leaned slightly toward the cabin as if drawn by an invisible thread. Daniel lifted her off the horse and carried her over the short path to the door. Her bare feet touched the wooden porch. She wavered, one hand briefly gripping his sleeve. "It's all right," Daniel murmured. "I've got you." He pushed the door open. Warmth, faint but familiar, rose to greet them. Dust floated in lazy spirals in the sunlight. The smell of old pine wood and dried herbs drifted in the air, and everything was exactly as he left it. 2 chairs by the hearth, the quilt Josie had sewn draped over the couch, the framed sketch Josie made of the mountains, still hanging crookedly above the mantel. Josie stepped inside timidly, like a deer testing a clearing. Her breath trembled, her eyes wandered from object to object, lingering, searching, aching without understanding why. Daniel walked beside her, speaking softly. "You made that quilt. Took you a whole winter. Said the pattern would remind us of sunshine when snow came thick." Josie blinked, watching the quilt. A faint crease formed between her brows, her mind straining against a wall it couldn't yet climb. Daniel continued, pointing to the drawings pinned on the wall. "You used to sketch the trees out back. Said they looked like they were whispering secrets to each other." Her breathing hitched. A tremor passed down her arm. Her fingers twitched toward the drawing, then stopped, falling back helplessly. "It's okay," Daniel whispered. You don't have to remember now. He guided her to the bedroom, the room that once held laughter, quiet mornings, whispered promises. The bed was neatly made, covered in the patchwork blanket Josie had loved. "You'll sleep here," Daniel said gently. "You used to—" He stopped himself. Too much. Too soon. Josie stepped toward the bed and touched the blanket. Her fingertips grazed the fabric, and for a moment her eyes softened. Something inside her folding inward like petals, remembering how to bloom. She sat down. Daniel knelt to untie the ragged cloth wrapped around her ankles. "I'll get you proper shoes tomorrow." As he tended to her feet, Josie watched him quietly, intensely, almost desperately, as if trying to place a dream she couldn't quite recall. When she stood again, her hand brushed his shoulder, feather light. Accidental? Instinctive? Daniel didn't breathe. Then she pulled her hand back, startled by her own movement. He steadied himself. "You hungry?" She nodded, her first clear response since he found her. In the kitchen, Daniel cooked rabbit stew with carrots and onions, Josie sitting silently at the table. She followed him with her eyes, every step, every motion, as if watching something familiar, long buried under years of fear. When he placed the bowl before her, she hesitated, but then ate slowly, spoon trembling, but steady. "You're doing so well," he whispered, eyes warm, voice low enough to be a secret. For the first time, Josie looked at him with something softer than confusion, something close to trust. Night fell early. Wind howled outside, and snow began to drift. Daniel built a fire, adding old pine logs that crackled with resin. Josie sat in the rocking chair, her chair, and moved back and forth gently. Daniel froze. She wasn't mimicking him. She wasn't reacting to a command. She had simply gravitated toward her old spot, her old comfort. His voice cracked. "You always liked that chair?" Josie gazed at the flames, rocking slowly, rhythmically, like she had done every winter evening in the years before she vanished. After dinner, Daniel prepared her for bed. He brought a warm wash basin, a clean cloth, and fresh clothes. He stepped out while she changed, mindful, respectful, heart aching. When she finally lay down beneath the blanket, Daniel tucked the edges around her gently. He brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. She didn't flinch this time. Her eyes followed his hand, then lifted, meeting his. Daniel whispered, "Good night, sweetheart." He immediately regretted it. Too intimate, too soon. But instead of fear or confusion, Josie's eyes softened. Her lips parted. Not in a word, she still couldn't speak, but in a small, delicate breath that felt like acceptance. Daniel stepped back and closed the door halfway. Then he lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Around midnight, the floorboards creaked. Daniel sat up instantly. Josie stood in the doorway, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, eyes shimmering with uncertainty. "Josie," he whispered, "what's wrong?" She didn't speak. She walked to the couch, slowly, hesitantly, and extended her hand. Daniel swallowed hard. "You want—" She nodded once. Daniel lifted the blanket and made space for her. Josie lay beside him, not touching at first. Her breath trembled. Then she turned toward him, pressing her forehead lightly against his chest. Daniel held very still, afraid one wrong move could break the fragile trust blooming between them. But Josie's fingers curled into his shirt, clinging, seeking, needing. Daniel closed his eyes, tears slipping silently into her hair. "You're home," he whispered. You're safe, and I'm right here." Josie didn't speak, couldn't speak, but her breathing evened out against him. For the first time in 5 long years, she fell asleep in his arms. For the first time in 5 long years, Daniel allowed himself to hope. Winter loosened its grip slowly, grudgingly, as if testing whether Daniel and Josie deserved spring after what life had already taken from them. Snow melted in thin ribbons along the creek, and the first shoots of green pushed stubbornly through damp soil behind the cabin. Josie had changed in those weeks. Her silence remained, but her movement softened. Her eyes no longer floated in emptiness. They searched, questioned, lingered on familiar corners of the cabin as though trying to decipher a language she once knew fluently. In the evenings, she sat near the fire with Daniel. Sometimes she leaned against him without warning, her cheek brushing his shoulder, her breathing syncing with his. Sometimes she watched his hands while he carved wood, her own fingers twitching faintly, as if remembering the feel of needles, of yarn, of stirring spoons. Daniel pretended not to notice these small miracles, but inside him, hope pulsed like a second heartbeat. He knew healing didn't happen in leaps. It happened in the quiet, in the unnoticed, in the steady warmth of a fire someone tended for you. But storms always come, especially in the West, and the one that arrived was not made of snow or wind, but of men, of the past, of blood. It began with tracks. Daniel was splitting logs when he noticed the prints by the tree line, fresh hoof marks, heavy, too deep for deer. 3 horses at least. Someone watching, someone following. He returned to the cabin, jaw tight. Josie was sweeping the floor when he entered. She looked up. Her eyes flicked to his tense shoulders, and her hand tightened on the broom. "It's nothing," he lied softly. "Just stay close to me today." She crossed the room and slid her hand into his, a small gesture, a powerful one. That night, Daniel barely slept. He listened for every rustle outside the cabin walls. Every groan of wind felt like a boot, every snap of branch like a cocked gun. Morning came cold and gray. Daniel saddled the horse, ready to ride to the nearest patrol station at Laramie Fork for help. "I'll be back before sundown," he promised. Josie's fingers twisted in his coat sleeve, her eyes pleading. He cupped her cheek gently. "You'll be safe. The cabin is locked. No one can hurt you here." He kissed her forehead, soft, hesitant, reverent. She closed her eyes. Daniel rode out, but he never made it to Laramie Fork. At the bend where the creek ran deep, he saw smoke. Black smoke, thick smoke, billowing from the direction of the cabin. His stomach dropped. He kicked his horse until it screamed. When he burst through the clearing, his heart stopped entirely. The cabin wasn't burning, but the barn was. Dead horse, broken boards, and Josie. Josie was on her knees by the cabin door, 3 men circling her like wolves. Daniel recognized them instantly. Dalton's men, the ones who survived, the ones who vowed revenge. He didn't remember drawing his gun. He only remembered the roar of it. 1 shot, another, a third, 3 bodies hitting the ground. Then silence. Daniel ran to Josie. She was shaking violently, eyes wide with the terror of someone reliving horrors she never escaped. He dropped beside her, catching her hands. I'm here, sweetheart. You're safe." But Josie didn't look at him. She wasn't in the clearing. She wasn't even in this year. Her mind had smashed open. Memories rushed in like a flood, too fast, too brutal. She clutched her head, gasping, choking on screams she hadn't allowed herself for years. Daniel held her as she convulsed with fear. "Josie, baby, breathe. Look at me, look at me." She did, and what Daniel saw made him freeze. Recognition, pain, love, grief. All of them awakened behind her eyes in the span of a heartbeat. It was like watching a candle being lit inside a dark room after years of blindness. Her mouth opened, trembling, struggling, fighting its way through years of silence. "Dan." Barely a whisper, barely a sound, but her first word since the day she vanished. Daniel fell to his knees. Tears blurred his vision. "Josie? Josie, talk to me." She swallowed hard, breath shaking like a newborn fawn standing for the first time. Daniel. His name. Perfect. Whole. Spoken with a voice he had thought he'd lost forever. He gathered her into his arms, holding her like he might never let go again. She sobbed into his chest, years of trapped cries escaping all at once. "I remember," she gasped. "I remember everything." Daniel closed his eyes, forehead pressed to hers. "Tell me," he whispered. "Tell me what happened." Through tears, through shuddering breaths, she told him. The horse spooked. Her fall, her head hitting the rock, waking in a cave, wandering for days, captured, beaten, sold, traded, broken, used, thrown away, until the desert nearly killed her, until she forgot even her name, until the slavers found her and put that cursed wooden sign around her neck. Daniel held her as she unraveled. He didn't speak. He didn't interrupt. He let her pour out the poison of 5 stolen years. When she finished, she lay trembling in his arms, exhausted. Daniel brushed her wet hair from her face and kissed her forehead. "You're home now," he whispered. "You're safe, and I swear on my life, no one will ever touch you again." Josie pressed her face into his chest and breathed him in. For the first time since her memory returned, she smiled, a real smile, fragile and radiant. "Daniel," she whispered, voice trembling but sure, "I love you. I always did. Even when I forgot, my heart never did." Daniel closed his eyes, broken and whole, all at once. "You're everything to me," he said. Everything. The storm had passed, but the air still felt charged, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. Daniel carried Josie inside the cabin, wrapped her in blankets, and checked her wounds. She was bruised, shaken, but alive. Thank God she was alive. But the danger wasn't over, because the 3 men Daniel killed outside weren't alone. Red Hand Dalton's brother, Caleb Dalton, had spent years tracking the man who killed his kin, and when Caleb learned about the slave auction at Desolation Gulch, learned a mountain man had thrown nearly $1,000 to buy back a woman labeled broken and worthless. Caleb became certain he had found the right man. He had followed them quietly, patiently, waiting for the perfect time. And now, with his men dead at the cabin, Caleb Dalton was coming in person. Daniel sensed it before he heard it, a heaviness in the forest, a shift in the wind, a predator approaching. He loaded his rifle, checked his Colts, and strapped on his old hunting knife. His movement slow and steady, but inside a storm of dread spun violently. Josie sat by the fire, wrapped in a wool blanket. She watched him prepare, and fear returned, not of Daniel, but for him. "Daniel," she whispered. Her voice was still new, fragile as spring ice. "Don't leave me." He knelt in front of her, touched her cheek. "I'm not leaving, and I won't let anything take you from me again." Her fingers curled into his coat, her eyes glistened. "Please, stay alive, for me." He kissed her, softly, deeply, desperately, a kiss of 5 lost years, a kiss of promises and fear and longing. Then he stood, rifle in hand. The door exploded inward. Caleb Dalton filled the doorway, a giant of a man with a scar running across half his face, snow on his boots, fury in his eyes. "You!" he growled, pointing at Daniel. "You killed my brother. You took my men. And now you hide in this cabin like a scared animal. Come outside and die like a man." Daniel stepped forward, calm, ready. But Josie grabbed his arm. "No, Daniel, no." Caleb looked at Josie and sneered. "And this must be the woman you paid everything for, the fat little slave, the broken one, a fitting prize for a murderer." Josie recoiled as if struck. Daniel saw red. He moved so fast Caleb didn't have time to blink. Daniel slammed into him, knocking them both into the snow. The rifle flew from his hands. Caleb grabbed him by the throat. Daniel drove an elbow into Caleb's jaw. Caleb kneed him in the ribs. Snow flew in violent arcs. Grunts, fists, blood. Josie stood in the doorway, hands trembling, tears streaking her face. But she didn't freeze. Not anymore. Not again. Daniel roared, struggling against the larger man. Caleb slammed Daniel's head into the ground once, twice, hard enough to make the world blur. Josie ran inside the cabin. Caleb drew his knife. "You should have stayed gone, mountain man." He raised the blade. Josie stepped behind him, silent as falling snow, and swung a heavy iron skillet with all her strength. The blow cracked across Caleb's skull like lightning. He collapsed face first into the snow. Silence. Daniel lay gasping, bleeding, stunned. Josie dropped the skillet and fell to her knees beside him. Daniel, look at me." His vision steadied enough to see her face hovering above his, soaked in tears, fierce with love. "You saved me," he whispered. Josie cupped his bleeding jaw. "You spent 5 years saving me. It was my turn." He pulled her close, burying his face against her neck. "I thought I'd lose you again." "Never again," she whispered, voice shaking. "I remember you, Daniel. I remember everything. And I won't lose you. Not now. Not ever." Daniel tightened his arms around her, holding her as if she were the only real thing in the world. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled softly. Outside, the storm clouds broke, revealing a sky washed clean. The danger had passed. The past had been defeated. But the future, their future, was only beginning. 2 days passed before Daniel could walk without swaying, before the bruises on his ribs faded from black to purple, before Josie stopped jerking awake in the middle of the night with the ghost of Caleb Dalton's shadow in her mind. But slowly, like dawn rising over the Wind River Range, peace returned to the cabin. The snow melted into glittering streams along the slope. Pines shook off their icy coats. Birds returned, their songs tentative but hopeful, as if testing whether the mountains were safe again. Inside, the cabin glowed with warmth. Josie moved through the rooms with new purpose, not as a lost soul, not as a ghost wearing human skin, but as a woman reclaiming her life piece by piece. She cooked again. She stacked firewood. She fixed Daniel's torn shirt with careful stitches. She laughed, quietly at first, then fuller, richer, like a long-forgotten melody returning to its refrain. Daniel watched her with something like awe. He'd spent 5 years searching for her shadow. He never expected to find her whole again. One evening, after dinner, they sat side by side on the wooden steps of the cabin. The sun was setting, spilling gold across the valley. Below them, the world was vast, wild, endless. Josie leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder. He kissed her hair softly. You doing all right, sweetheart?" She nodded. "Every day feels lighter, like I'm stepping out of a long, dark dream." Daniel took her hand, calloused fingers brushing her soft palm. "I'm proud of you, more than I can ever say." She swallowed, voice trembling in the way it did whenever truth rose to the surface. "I didn't think I would ever feel safe again." "You're safe with me," he said gently. Her eyes shimmered. "This place, it feels like home." Daniel turned to face her fully. His voice dropped lower, steadier, carrying the weight of every day he'd searched for her in snow, rain, heat, and despair. "Josie, this is your home, if you want it, if you want us." She touched his cheek, grazing the faint scars left by Caleb's fists. "I want you, Daniel. I want this life. I want every tomorrow we're given." He exhaled shakily, relief and love flooding through him. "I won't let anything take you again. Not memory, not men, not fate." Josie's eyes brimmed with grateful tears. "And I won't let anything take you. I know my voice is still quiet, but it's stronger now because I remember why I need it. I remember who I am. I remember loving you." Daniel pulled her gently into his arms. She came willingly, resting her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. An anchor, a promise, a prayer. They stayed like that as daylight faded and the first stars blinked awake overhead. The mountains, once witnesses to their loss, now held their reunion in quiet reverence. Inside the cabin, the fire waited, warm and welcoming. Daniel stood and reached out a hand to her, softly, tenderly. "Come inside," he murmured. "Let's go home." Josie placed her hand in his. Together, they stepped into the glow of the cabin, their cabin, leaving the cold world outside the door. The future was uncertain. The West was wild, and life could break a person with little warning. But in that small cabin on Wind River Mountain, two people who had lost everything found the courage to begin again. Stories like this remind us that love doesn't always arrive gently. Sometimes it disappears, breaks, gets stolen, and comes back to us in pieces. But what truly matters is when two hearts, shattered, bruised, tested, still choose each other in the end. Daniel searched 5 years for a woman the world threw away. Josie returned to a man she had forgotten, but whose love never forgot her. If you're listening right now, tell me, where in the world are you hearing this story from? Which city? Which country? Your comments keep these frontier tales alive. And if you still believe in love's miracles, stay close. The next story is already on its way.